multiplicative advantage over the competition. Fourth are businesses that are driven by innovation. For a firm where models and styles do not change frequently, information processing is not such a competitive differentiator. However, in an industry or a product category where fashions evolve quickly, the Internet allows ideas to spread easily between firms, with change agents such as editors and with consumers. If the product category encompasses a large variety, often the consumer is savvier about trends and styles and has the ability to offer the firm many innovative ideas through feedback and chat rooms. The last group of companies that benefit from the Internet are those firms that have operations that encompass repetitive and or rational behaviors on the purchaser's part. Many products or services are in decision-making categories that are very rational, and there's not much emotion involved. That is one of the reasons many of the B2B websites have been fairly successful. Here, the choice of a new product or service is made through a very logical, sequential process. Information searches can be made quickly and stored online for future reference. Furthermore, when purchases are routine and fairly consistent, e-commerce simplifies the buying process for both parties and allows the producer to project inventory requirements and reduce the cost. Firms like Staples, the office supply chain, enable their customers to simplify the boring, routine ordering processes and streamline their own costs by retaining loyal customers and managing their inventory well. There is no single portrait of a successful e-commerce firm, as many factors enter into the equation, and the equation is constantly changing. There are some industries, however, in which there is a better or a poorer probability of success. Let's start by looking at the industries that have experienced difficulties in adapting to the e-commerce model. In the uncharted territory of the Internet, there is no sure path to success, but many routes to problems or failures. Some of the industries in which there has been less success include retailing of emotionally motivated purchases, travel and entertainment, healthcare treatment, auto repair, and construction. Let's first look at why retailing of emotionally motivated purchases has not enjoyed success over the Internet. When men buy flowers, it's not really because they find it to be a stimulating experience, but rather it's because they are obligated to do so. For them, buying flowers online from a reliable firm that has a history of their purchases and may be able to offer advice is a real benefit. For women, on the other hand, buying flowers is a very sensual, emotional purchase, and they would be unlikely to purchase online. They enjoy flower shopping. Similarly, buying a fur coat is virtually never a rational decision, and it has to be experienced, not just performed. Such a product category, purchased by either a male or a female, would not fare very well online. Travel and entertainment businesses, with the exceptions of reservations, have also failed to produce meaningful online presences. While consumers are learning to book their own flights, select their own seats on the plane, and even advise the airline of special meal requirements, the actual delivery of satisfaction still depends on the experience on the plane, in the hotel, or at the amusement park. No matter how efficient the online booking can be, if the line at the airport is long or the bed in the hotel is lumpy, the experience for the consumer is negative. Providers need to match the efficiency of the Internet with consumers' actual experiences. Companies in healthcare treatment have also found it difficult to succeed online. While the Internet is able to provide substantial amounts of information about health, illness, and nutrition, medical treatment cannot be administered via the Internet. Healthcare must be administered directly to the individual and remains very labor-intensive. Auto repair businesses are by nature not suited to e-commerce. The automobile retail system, operating through dealers, is a rather anachronistic system, but it is locked into place by law in the United States. A car cannot be sold entirely via the Internet legally. Neither can the automobile be repaired via the Internet, although some diagnostics might be possible. Lastly, let's look at construction firms. Construction firms have not managed to adapt to the e-commerce model either. In bidding for construction jobs, the Internet expands the possible producers and suppliers so that individuals with specialty construction expertise can be matched with special jobs. However, the job needs to be performed in a very physical, not virtual way. Now, let's consider those industries that are well suited to e-commerce success. Any industry that can employ information brokering, can simplify the routine, humdrum aspects of the purchase, or offer multiple products and services and profit from a variety of different sources, has a better than average chance of success in the electronic marketplace. Consider what part of the purchase process the consumer enjoys, which parts don't bother him, and what steps he hates. Evaluate if your product or service provided via the Internet can remove the part of the task the consumer dislikes. If so, you may have a very competitive share of the e-marketplace. Again, let me give you a non-Internet example. Most men hate to shave, but like having a neatly trimmed beard or a clean-shaven face, or at least their wife or girlfriend does. Similarly, most women don't enjoy all of the time required to style their hair, but prefer to look nice. For any stylist or manufacturer who could develop a method that the man could have a shaved face without shaving, or the woman could have beautifully coiffed hair with no effort, the profits would be huge. The effective Internet marketer is the one who can find the way to give the consumer fun and the final product without all the drudgery. Of course, the firm must still produce enduring quality at a good value. These include businesses that sell to other businesses, the financial services industry, the entertainment industry, and companies operating in niche markets. The industry most suited for the e-commerce model is the B2B sector. Because so much of purchasing between businesses is very routine, the B2B sector has and can continue to realize substantial profits through lower costs due to economies of scale, managing the supply chain better, and reducing the human resource component of the cost structure. The purchasing process for businesses is largely rational and more easily habitualized than are many consumer buying behaviors. The financial services industry has also experienced tremendous gains from the Internet. As the economy becomes increasingly more cashless, financial services such as mortgage brokering, insurance, stock trading, and investment management are increasingly well suited to e-commerce. Such activities are very cost-effective to the financial firm and enable the consumer to control the flow of information. The entertainment sector is also well suited to the Internet, as many entertainment activities can be delivered directly to the consumer reasonably effectively. However, there is an inherent problem with the delivery of music and videos, etc., especially among the younger generation of net surfers. The problem is Napster mentality. Many believe that most forms of entertainment and software should be free. Several years of being able to share music freely before Napster was legally thwarted has conditioned many consumers under 25 years old to the idea that many products should be free and that intellectual property rights are irrelevant. This remains a big problem for providers. Finally, companies offering niche products to niche customers are ideal for the Internet. For producers who have a very special product offering, targeting, for example, owners of a certain breed of dog who need a particular item, or swimmers who have particularly big feet and need large swim fins, the size of their market expands logarithmically when they enter the e-marketplace. In the same vein, members of very small niche markets are often able to find several providers of a product and actually make comparisons between products before purchase. Those niche markets can be very beneficial to both the players in the exchange and substantially reduce buyers' resources spent in the search process. and increase their satisfaction. For some products that are virtually once-in-a-lifetime purchases, such as an item to be used in a wedding, hopefully that is a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, the Internet is one of the most useful tools the consumer has in his search process. Let me end with some brief observations about human nature and the Internet. The successful Internet marketer has to realize that while the hardware has changed rapidly and leapfrogged into new technology, the human element, the user, has not changed substantially. Early Internet providers expected radical revolution in consumer behavior because the entire system was so different, and the original users were surfing new sites frequently. That early behavior was exhibited by the true innovators of the marketplace. As the early adopters and eventually the majority of users logged on, their behavior became less extreme and less adventuresome. Even the innovative original users soon found comfortable sites, bookmarked them, and fell into familiar routines. Consumers are creatures of comfort that seek simplified ways to solve problems. Recently, in research we conducted in the United States, Thailand, and Australia, we found that Internet shoppers wanted websites to look like stores in which they shopped. They wanted to be familiar with the layout and merchandise, but be able to fly over with the cursor the sections of the store they did not need to visit. In many ways, we found they did not really seek something dramatically different, just something that simplified their lives. Humans are very much creatures of habit. They will most often visit the sites of stores or firms they already know. Once they visit a new site, such as Amazon.com, for the first time, which they don't know offline, they may become quickly habituated to it, thus including switching costs, such as securing a substantial amount of information the first time the consumer visits the site, then shortcutting the consumer to that shaved face, that styled hair, without the drudgery. Directly to the fun part of shopping is what holds them to your site. There may be substantial first-mover advantages to Internet sites, because once the consumer visits and enters substantial amounts of data, that site is as familiar as his favorite restaurant. Just like the consumer who visits the mall, parks in the same area of the parking lot, visits only 3 of the 100 stores in the mall, but visits those 3 regularly. Consumers are currently establishing their regular online patterns. If your business matches some of the requirements of the successful businesses we previously discussed, then work to become the site that the customer parks in front of, runs in to visit frequently, and has the ultimate loyalty towards. Simplify his life, but don't expect to cause him to revolt or even evolve rapidly. He is the same old customer we always knew. Thank you.
Let's begin with the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax, which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Thank you. And our first question today is from Irapuato, Mexico. Waiting for it to come in.
Sí, bueno.
Aló, sí, hable por favor. The question is, what kind of product or service from Mexico can benefit from the e-commerce in order to increase their exports?
So what kind of product or service? Lois, would you like to take that question?
Well, one of the things that you normally think of is Do I have something that is distinctly different from other people and that is not available everywhere? Certainly there are many products that are available in Mexico that people in the United States, people in France, people virtually any place outside Mexico or even outside a particular region in Mexico don't have availability. It's not very accessible. Those kinds of products, some of them might be very local. It could even be a commodity bought by business to business, through business to business commerce. It could be a consumer product. I could think of certain things in the way of handicrafts. Certainly there's a lot of things such as jewelry. If you develop a very good website that can display things, again, let's take something like some really nice silver jewelry, that a consumer could sit at home, online, and review the jewelry, purchase it without all the intermediaries, all those jewelry stores who tack on such high margins. The market could be absolutely phenomenal. What you have to identify again is, do I have something that people somewhere else can't get? Sometimes we forget that. We assume whatever is local, everyone has. But Mexico has many products like that, processed and unprocessed products that would be perfect.
Things like non-perishable food products could very well be shipped. And if there's lower production costs in Mexico, they could find markets in the United States that have very favorable economics in terms of being cheap enough for American consumers to be attracted to.
Okay, our next question is also coming to us from Mexico. And that question is coming to us from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional Educación Continua. And I'm sorry if I have not translated that very well, but you all will help me on this, I'm sure.
Sí. Buenos días.
Buenos días, México,
La
adelante.
pregunta es, ¿cómo considera en el mediano plazo?
What do you think on the short term or medium term the use of e-commerce in Latin American countries? What do you think is going to be that presence on a short or medium term basis?
The presence in the short or medium term. Peter, you're nodding. Would you like to take a first stab at that?
Sure. I think Latin America is ready for increased e-commerce in the short term and obviously beyond that. One of the exciting things about e-commerce is you can almost instantly create a global market. Now, that doesn't mean you should shut down your actual business site, your store or your mall locations. But what it does mean is you may be able to dramatically expand your business by literally going worldwide through the World Wide Web. And if it's a particular kind of, let's say, pottery or silver or food, it may be attractive to people from Japan to Sweden. And suddenly now you're getting orders on a global basis. So I think there is an opportunity here to immediately move into the global market in the short term.
I would add to that there's a real advantage that Latin America has. If you think about what languages we speak in the world, it's thousands, but over half the world speaks Chinese, English, or Spanish. At present, 83% of everything on the Internet is in English. And second is Japanese. So anyone who develops a Spanish language Internet site immediately has access to somewhere on the order of close to 600 million people. And by the way, many Japanese also would prefer to read or speak Spanish as opposed to English. So simply taking, in some cases, even the same product that might be available from an American site, doing it in Spanish creates a huge market. We've worked with someone here in the United States who's taken some really, the only way I can describe them is really dumb junk products that are available on infomercials and commercials here in the United States, sells them online in Spanish, and does a phenomenally good job.
And that market exists even in the United States, where 10 to 20% of the people in many states, in California and Texas even more than that, speak Spanish. So there's not even a necessity to have a dual website in English and Spanish to get started.
Right. Excellent. Reaching new consumers with a language that's not well represented yet on the internet.
Yes.
Our next question comes to us from Panama. It comes to us from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. We'll listen for that.
Buenas. Desde la Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá, la pregunta es la siguiente.
Gracias. Our question is, what is your experience of e-commerce in third world countries that have very little technology or not good technology? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question about third world countries that don't have as much technology. What is going on there with e-commerce? Peter, once again, you're nodding and eager. Would you like to start us off?
Well, certainly a certain amount of technical infrastructure is necessary. As Dr. Olson was saying in her segment, obviously you need an internet connection. You need a web server. You need consumers that have some means of accessing the internet. People need credit cards. You need some electronic means of doing instantaneous credit card verification and response. You need an infrastructure that has trucks, planes, and or ships to be able to ship your product to the consumer or to the business that has purchased it. So certainly, countries that are farther along the continuum of development are at an advantage in moving more quickly toward an e-commerce basis.
On the other hand, sometimes third world countries, well, the infrastructure is incredibly important, as we have both talked about.
Right.
There is sometimes an advantage in a third world country, something called leapfrogging. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of technological leapfrogging. In the United States, we all have land phone lines. In third world countries, many cases we're just leapfrogging right into cellular technology. I see some of that happening with retail. We have so many shopping malls in the United States, Japan, and Western Europe. We have alternative places, warehouse stores, where we can buy things. In a third world country where the retail market isn't that well developed, it's not unfathomable to think that we may just leapfrog straight into a lot of products being sold via the internet.
Okay, great point. Well, our next question comes to us from Colombia, from Medellin, Colombia, from the Federación Nacional de Comerciantes.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días.
Buenos días. Thank you. One of the fundamental pillars in the traditional process of marketing are the distributors or members of the channel. What is their role in the e-commerce system, and how can we avoid or prevent them from seeing the website of the company as a threat when we're talking about the threat between the distributors and the retailers or the online sellers?
Thank you. This is a question about the role for the distributors in this new commerce. Lois.
Well, there's a concept we use in English called disintermediation, and probably the translator will kill me for that. It means basically taking out the intermediaries. That has been one of the beauties of the Internet, in that we can take out so many of the people. However, it is a great opportunity for the distributors to actually become the channel captain, the power brokers within the channel, and actually interact with the suppliers on one end and the consumers on the other end, and use this opportunity to sort of take charge of where the marketplace is going, rather than seeing it as a threat, look at it as an opportunity.
Lois is exactly right. However, there's some perils associated with this. I was meeting with some of the executives a year or so ago of Matsushita Electric, otherwise known as Panasonic, in the Western Hemisphere, and they were very concerned that if they put their products on the Internet, they would have a rebellion among all of the retailers in stores throughout the world that thought that the company that had previously had a great relationship with them now was doing an end run through e-commerce and literally creating unemployment in the retail industry. So it's tricky, and one has to think about the consequences along the whole supply chain of making a move to e-commerce.
Excellent question and interesting response about how to move the old into the new world here. Very interesting. We have a question now from Buenos Aires in Argentina, from the Grupo Previsional Nación.
Sí, buenos días, acá desde la Argentina.
Buenos días, adelante la pregunta. We would like to ask the following question. The market in Argentina has disseminated the use of, widespread the use of credit cards. However, people don't want to use credit cards over the internet because they're afraid. What would you suggest in order to overcome this mentality and this problem?
Okay, an excellent question here about the fear of credit card use on the internet. Peter.
Well, I think basically it's an irrational fear. First of all, many sites on the internet are extremely secure, and they have elaborate encryption procedures that make the chance of anyone stealing your credit card relatively low. It is interesting that when we go into a gas station or a store, we willingly hand our credit card over to a clerk, a gas station attendant, a part-time employee, maybe who is an unsavory character. We certainly don't get credit references from gas station attendants when we hand over our credit card to them. They have a copy of our credit card. They could write it down. They could use it. So I think it is more fear of the unknown than any realistic fear that is valid about thievery in the e-commerce world.
And how would businesses help people to get over that fear?
Well, I think having, announcing that their websites are secure and that they've used some of the latest encryption and security procedures so that hackers can't easily hack into their site and steal it. And finally, credit card companies, as soon as you report the card missing, are responsible for subsequent purchases. So it may be a problem for the banks that issue the credit card, but it's frankly less of a problem for the consumer than I think most perceive.
Okay. Lois, anything to add there?
And I think in many ways in the United States we had a fear much like that just using credit cards in general before we even went on the internet. One of the things that you can do as a consumer is have a very low credit limit and buy something very small and increase the amount that you're purchasing just to become comfortable and realize that it is very safe. And just as Peter says, anytime we use our credit card, we are exposing ourselves to possible theft and fraud. Once you start using the credit card, as most Americans will tell you, you realize the wonderful convenience. It just shortcuts everything, and so it quickly does become a habituated behavior.
Right, and you have to contrast it with the risk of carrying a lot of cash with you all the time. In a sense, a credit card's safer than doing that.
But Lois, I'm hearing you suggest that maybe a strategy might be for a company to enter into this internet world with some sort of smaller priced experience.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's two things that the company can do. If you're selling something that is a $30,000 item, it's going to be difficult. There will be people who will have a resistance. But if you have items that are lower priced that they can kind of dabble, I think that's one of the reasons that things like CDs and books have been successful. They're not that expensive. So you buy one once and you find out, ooh, this is nice. I sat in my pajamas. I ordered online. It arrived at my house. I didn't have to hassle with any other problem. But the other thing that you can think about doing, especially if you're a smaller manufacturer, is there are retail organizations that will actually do the whole process for you for a small fee. Now, you may say, I don't want to pay the 1% or 3% fee, but they kind of take a lot of the burden and the responsibility off of you.
Okay, thank you. For our next question, we're back in Mexico at Los Mochis, Sinaloa, the Universidad de Occidente.
Sí, buenos días.
Muy buenos días.
Son dos preguntas.
We have two questions here. The first one is, how safe and secure is it to buy via internet? And do you know what the fraud rates are or ratios are? Do you have an idea of that, the percentage of fraud on the internet?
Okay, thank you. This question really kind of follows up on our last question. We've been talking a little bit about how safe and secure it is, but the specific question is, do we know anything about the fraud rate?
I don't have any actual statistics, but I've never personally heard of anyone getting their credit card stolen on the internet. Now, there's also an issue of, is the business that you're buying from a legitimate business? And so I think it's important to buy from a known entity. Certainly Amazon.com, which is a pure e-tailer, is very, very well known, and you can be very sure that they're going to take your order, they're going to charge your credit card the appropriate amount, and they're going to deliver the merchandise on time. Likewise, companies that have an international presence and are famous retail companies prior to the advent of e-commerce are going to be very safe. A company you never heard of might be slightly riskier, but I don't know any statistics on the amount of fraud. I can tell you this, it's relatively uncommon.
I would think that perhaps the fraud still remains higher offline. We hear stories, even every week, that some company has been frauding people. And typically, you look at it, a rational purchase, an emotional purchase. The more emotional your purchase is, the more likely that the provider may be creating a fraudulent situation, not really even have a product. The more rational the product, the more rational the decision making, like a computer, where the margins on computers are so small. It wouldn't pay them to be fraudulent. It would have to be a much more emotional product. I don't know if this is true so much in many of the countries we're broadcasting to, but for instance, in the United States, the funeral industry, there's tremendous fraud that goes on there because people are very emotionally involved in the purchase of that product. So it depends, I think, to a large extent on what we're selling, and a lot of what we sell on the internet is not that emotional, at least not yet.
Okay, excellent. Our next question comes to us from our neighbor institution right down in Tijuana, Mexico, and it's from the Centro Universitario de Tijuana.
Buenos días.
How can we promote the culture among companies that are in the developing countries where usually only a few sectors of society have access to this kind of medium? Thank you.
How can we promote this where not too much of the population has access to this kind of medium? Peter?
Well, this is not only a problem in the third world, but it's also a problem in the poor sections of the United States. It's called the digital divide.